Welcome to Demystifying IT. I'm your host, Sarojit Kanungo, CEO of CG Infinity. Well, good morning. Clearly, we live in the age of AI. Life is definitely getting more and more interesting with AI almost invading all parts of our lives. Executives and digital leaders are having to make decisions at the speed of light. We are forced to live in a more and more probabilistic world. AI may be new to us, but AI is not new to my guest today and my esteemed colleague, Eric Rasmussen. Eric has been in the middle of AI for over a decade and a half. Eric, welcome to Demystifying IT.
Thank you for having me. My background has been building production AI systems in enterprise environments for, like you said, about 16 years now, and not just models, but full lifecycle AI systems from data pipelines to deployment, governance, and of course, measurable business impact. What excites me about AI is that a lot of people think of it as a tool, but I think of it more as a embedded decisioning system that allows people to make better decisions, to make faster decisions, and to do all of that with less risk. And that's really how I think about AI.
Awesome. Thank you for that background. Let's start with a fun question, okay? Let's make it hypothetical. You somehow discovered a pile of money, and with some good fortune, you're able to buy the worst performing team in the National Football League. Being the owner of the team, how would you use AI to drive the performance of that team?
Where I would start with AI is I would start looking at the decisions that are being made today, so such as on game day, during the week, even in the off season with, player acquisitions and such. And I would start trying to identify workflows that there are friction. So a good use case of this might be like a coaching co-pilot that could be rolled out to coaches and assistants that could help them make better decisions on game day. And where I would start with that is I would start by gathering data. So looking at like the team's internal data, there's both their structured, unstructured data, gathering the workout reports, things like that. Creating a overall system. I would also gather external data so that we could take a look at things like team stats, and that would allow the coach to answer questions like, what play performs well against this team on third down and long? What's the injury risk for this player for this week based upon the factors? So this system would incorporate both traditional machine learning methods as well as generative methods, large language models. We would kind of tie everything all together in application or dashboard that could be used, on game day to gather this information. And so really, it's not about replacing what the coach does. It's about augmenting what he does and helping him make better decisions.
In that world, do you still need a massive number of coaches, assistant coaches, and all that stuff? Or you can have AI do almost maybe 50% of those coaching jobs that, big staff is doing today?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's a very common one. Everybody is worried about AI taking jobs. And I feel that it's not necessarily a replacement. It's an augmentation. So if you think about where similar technologies came into play historically, look at the internet. The same panic, the same that my job is going to be taken, or, I'm not going to have anything to do. It really didn't play out the way that people initially thought. And I don't think AI is going to do the same. I don't think it's here to take your job. I think it's here to help make your job better.
Let's switch gears. Let's talk about what are some of the common mistakes our companies doing with AI?
The most common mistake that I see companies making with AI today is starting from the top down. They see their competitors integrating AI. They've heard every like a lot of buzz about AI on the news, and they've maybe even seen what it can do, and so they rush to hire certain like AI leaders and create AI strategy. Where I've seen companies be successful is that instead of starting at that high level strategy, they start identifying workflows that could be enhanced by AI or good AI use cases. So this is going to be things that are manual, that are measurable, and that can be deployed quickly. So something like document processing or an internal copilot where you have knowledge that's kind of fragmented across different systems. You can really kind of combine that into a single system and provide quick value. And that's what companies should really be looking at. They should be looking at those work streams, identifying them, applying AI, and then expanding horizontally across adjacent use cases and really kind of building the system from the ground up and not the top down.
My next question is, what are some of the low-hanging use cases of applying AI that almost exist every company that we look at?
Absolutely. So I think, as I've referred to a couple times, Copilot is an excellent use case. Too often times, knowledge is fragmented across SMEs, internal documentation, different systems, CRM systems, Slack channels. And in order to really kind of find what you're looking for, is cumbersome, and it takes you kind of have to know where to look or who to ask in order to get the correct answer. And so I think AI is a great use case for that as an internal knowledge assistant for a lot of companies. They can get a better grounded, context aware answer, and quickly too.
So this is a two-part question. The first part is, what does a modern AI architecture look like? And the second part is, what a digital leader has to grasp to strike a balance between delivering quick result to the enterprise as well as planning for the future.
AI architecture could be pretty simple, and I like to think of it in different layers. So a total of 5 layers. The first is going to be the input layer, and this is where you gather data sources, both structured and unstructured. You both internal and external as well, and you unify the data sources. The next layer is going to be a processing layer where you're transforming, normalizing data, and oftentimes creating repeatable and reusable features for feature engineering. The third layer is going to be your modeling layer, and this is where you're going to have your LLMs as well as your traditional machine learning models, and sometimes even multimodal models for things like computer vision or audio.
Okay.
From there, you have your orchestration layer. There's increased focus on this layer because this is where you have your agents, your tool calling. This is where the rubber meets the road and connects your models to your systems that actually take actions. And then finally, you're going to have your interface layer. And this is where your end user is going to interact with the system that you've built. But the important thing about the stack is actually what's around it. And so that's what really kind of turns it from like a demo to a production grade system. And I'm talking about like your governance, your model monitoring, your performance reporting, and things like that really kind of push it over the edge and from kind of a cool demo to a production system that's useful.
Well, so let me dive a little bit deeper into that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What I'm noticing that digital leaders are struggling is that, yes, this architecture is great and you create these 5 layers, but suddenly the vendors, LLM vendors are coming up with, like, say, for example, MCP, right? Model Context Protocol. And they are like, well, it's a paradigm shift. And those type of groundbreaking innovation in the AI architecture, how should digital leader plan to take the benefit now, but yet don't put them in a hole and not being able to accommodate the future innovations that we have not even seen that?
That's a great question because all too often I see people and companies getting locked into certain systems, and trying to back out of that, it becomes increasingly difficult.
Yeah.
And so there are programs like LangChain, or kind of other programs that really kind of standardize everything, where you're able to kind of remove a model and plug in another one, or kind of quickly switch between one architecture or another. And I think a lot of that comes at the design phase when you're planning out your system.
Yeah.
I like to spend a little bit of extra time here because it really kind of makes a difference, especially when there are big vendor contracts on the line.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, kind of spending a little extra time in design, and designing in a way that is agnostic with respect to things like cloud or model selection, or kind of even monitoring, really pays dividends later.
What are some of the unconventional AI use cases that people are not necessarily paying attention to?
Some of the unconventional use cases that kind of maybe kind of low hanging fruit for companies. A lot of companies don't necessarily kind of have full insight into kind of what is going on in their business today. As I mentioned before, sometimes data can be super fragmented, like across many different channels.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you're not aware of certain issues until it's too late. I think AI can be deployed in a way that shifts that from a reactive monitoring system towards a more proactive system. Like you could use AI to ask if there's certain team alignment, or kind of what the biggest risks are for XYZ initiative. I think that's really kind of having it as a kind of a meta layer into the business is super helpful.
As you know, as a society, we love debating everything, right? From politics, religion, whatever, right? And AI is no different.
Yeah.
There is already great debate about, Claude is better, and chat does not meet our needs, or some Gemini lovers are there. So how do you think about that? Should we be thinking differently? Which one, other than which one is better?
Yeah, while there are some models that are better at, kind of other use cases than other models, I really don't think that discussion is really kind of super valid when it comes to ultimate production systems.
Yeah.
Any large language model should be able to kind of handle basic use cases. A lot of times when you're integrating them into production systems, you're not getting the same output as if you were to go, just type something in ChatGPT. You're getting something like, XML or JSON that is controlling, other systems, or, kind of even code. So while there are certain models that are better at certain things, a lot of them handle, kind of the basic use cases pretty well.
I would like to dive a little deeper into that. So normally I'm being told that you really don't have to build any LLMs. It's cost prohibitive and so on and so forth. But is there a case where somebody could make an argument for building their own language model, even though it may be a small language model?
Yeah, you can do stuff. You can kind of build and train language models, from scratch. However, if you were kind of starting from scratch, trying to develop something like a large language model, you really have to consider, the data that was trained on. So a lot of times, kind of the earlier models were trained in a different environment where data was you were able to easily scrape sites like, Reddit and Twitter and Wikipedia. Wikipedia you still can, but it takes a enormous amount of data in order to actually train a model from scratch. And that's why you see, governments contracting with actual private companies to provide their language models, because even a nation state with unlimited resources, it would be a significant burden to train a large language model from scratch. However, what you can do is you could take, kind of open source models, and you can fine tune them. You can have them learn, internal company vocabulary. You can have them, kind of learn certain, things that you wanted to learn. So you can take, kind of the open source as a base and really customize it through fine tuning.
What do you do when you are not working?
I enjoy learning, so I try to learn something new every day. My wife makes fun of me because I like to read white papers. And so, yeah, oftentimes I'm digging through white papers, and, oftentimes it's AI related, but sometimes, if I'm interested in learning a subject, kind of dive in, that may be, medical, or not so good at engineering yet, but.
All right. Well, Eric, thank you very much for your time today. I really enjoyed chatting with you and learning a little more about AI. I can always use that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Subscribe now and join the conversation.